Hello, historians. This is Eric Beckman, and I'm coming to you from St. Paul, Minnesota, where I live, where spring is starting to happen, I think. And I was at a soccer game today, so I still have my Minnesota United shirt on, which connects to our chat because today's player of the match for Minnesota was from Madagascar, or he's French. His family's from Madagascar, so which is on the Indian Ocean. I see some people in the chat. I'm hoping you can hear me. So if you can hear me, if you could type in one thing that comes to mind from world history when you hear Indian Ocean. Ooh, that's nice, Caleb. World history is awesome. No, you are not going to fail. Yeah, trash would be very recent history, but there is something like that. These are all good things. I think we'll go for about an hour. This is my first live stream, so I probably won't be as adept looking over at the chat and back at you or into the camera as Amanda and some of the veteran streamers are, but I will try to keep tabs on your question. Yeah, monsoons is a big deal, and huge shout out for Swahili city-states. I did a presentation on that at the World History Association last year, and using Swahili to teach some of these things in world history. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's very good. Just some housekeeping things. If you have a question, there's a parking lot for questions down there. Ask a question, and I'll go for a little bit, and then I'll pause, and we can kind of look at some of those. I also put a poll up. There's 2 polls in there. If you could check those out, that would be good. And then also there's another stream tonight. So I think this, like I said, about an hour, then an hour off, and then someone else is going to be coming in to do some spice review by period. So that will be one particular period. And the goal of this chat is to show connections across periods. All right, well, I'm going to share my screen, and yeah, the next one will be a lot friendlier for people who are in Pacific time. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have some slides, but I will also keep an eye on what people are asking, and you can park some questions there in the ask a question. So here we go. Oh, I see I'm learning how to do this. There we go. Share. You should see the last slide. I'll go up to the beginning slide. And I think there's a way that these are made available then. So for people to see. I have the fiveable template here, but I didn't get my own slides into it. So it's a mix of that and whatever Google theme I went with. Stream, I think. There we are. So that is us. And we'll be looking at periods mostly 2 through 4. So showing I want to help you kind of see connections across those 4 periods. All right. So Indian Ocean exchange was suggested to me by one of my students as, a topic. I said, I'm going to do this, and what would be a good topic to do? And the student suggested this. And as I thought about it, that was a very good suggestion. It's a very big deal. I mean, for starters, I learned this when I was looking up a little bit on here, but 1/3 of humans live in a country that borders the Indian Ocean right now. And then if we start to include China as part of the Indian Ocean world, because it was so networked into China, it is pretty astounding how that works. So there's a lot of people involved. Okay. It's also interregional. So world history is all about finding connections. So any place where you can find a connection from one thing to another region, that's good. And so that's why things like the Silk Roads and the Trans-Saharan networks and the Columbian Exchange, the Atlantic economy, those are the really big ideas. So we have these regions, which you can see. And then, as I said, really the Mediterranean and East Asia are connected into it, the whole time through the South China Sea and Red Sea. If you don't know anything else, no trade. The AP World exam loves trade. And the other thing that's good about doing trade, I saw in the comments, coming in, a lot of people are nervous. And, my comment to that was, 2.5 weeks is still a long time. So really, you probably know more than you think. And some of the easiest things to remember are often about trade. So it's my goal tonight to help you to see how those things, the things that you already know, how you can leverage them to do the more complicated tasks. And I think there was a couple of these words people actually put into the chat with Indian Ocean, so that's great. So I think we know these are all words that the AP World Test loves too. So if you can talk about trade and diffusion and diasporic communities and syncretism, I mean, you're living. Okay. So this is my goal. These are my goals for you for tonight. So these key concepts from periods 2, 3, and 4. And then, like I said, what are some examples we can use as evidence? One of the things I tell my students a lot in AP World is that it's important to know that you don't have to know everything. You just have to know something. So can we take the things that you do know and then think about how we can use them to do the jobs that you need to do on the AP World test, which is like causation, comparison, contextualization, continuity, and change. So instead of just like a straight up Indian Ocean lecture, what I have here are slides that take the ideas about the Indian Ocean, things that we know, and maybe there's some things you didn't know and you could write them down, but things that you know, and then how can you use them to do the task, whether that's in multiple choice or free response. So one thing you might do if you're writing down things, especially people, for anyone who's writing anything down, which is a good idea, is you could is to take what you already know and sort it. So as you write down things from like this presentation or the comments and questions, what you might do is put down, how does it fit in? Could you use it to show a cause and effect? Does it compare to something else? Do you put it in, can you use it to contextualize a bigger topic or a smaller topic? So kind of think about that. My biggest tip for students, whether they're nervous or not, is to take what you already know and then figure out how it fits into the time periods and the places and the concepts. All right. So this is key concept 2.3. So it's the third, and they're in order. So it's the third most important of the 3 key concepts for period 2. Now, period 2 is about 15% of the exam. So with that, and then the other 2 periods, 3 and 4, the Indian Ocean's a big deal in about half of the course. What is interesting to me looking at this key concept and thinking about how you can, what you can do to, prepare for the test is this one has contextualization right in it. So if contextualization, context, is something that you find difficult, and I know there were questions about it last night in the DBQ session that Amanda did. If you have questions about that, this is a really good chance to practice that. So let's take a peek here. So here's a map of the Indian Ocean world. Why don't you just take a look and see which, big empires are we talking about that are contextualizing this? Oh, right. I just saw that question about the slides. I think to do that, I have to, I can do that pretty easily. Or are the slides on the screen? Looks like there's some differences there of opinion on that idea. And I can't quite The slides are on the screen. Okay, you see them now. Okay, if someone else could put the slide link into the chat, that would be something. That would be better. Because I'm not sure how to do that right now. Because there's a little dialog box covers where I would type into the chat. So I'm going to reload this. Okay. So just to go back to this real quick. So the key concept already has the idea of contextualization right in it. So this is a really good way to talk about that. Okay. So that it says the organization of large scale empires. So there's 4. And that's pretty basic AP world. Now here's the good news is you don't have to know everything about all of those to use them as contextualization. And in fact, you only need to know about one. And this is the thing. The best tip for teachers of AP World History is to teach the key concepts, not every single example of them. So if you know a ton about Han China, but not much about the others, you're really in just about as good of shape, or maybe better shape than somebody who knows a little bit about all of them. So if you have something in the class that's been really interesting, it's all right to follow that up. I'm going to show you a little frame for doing contextualization. So when you're putting contextualization into an essay, I think there's 3 parts to it. And this was what I came to after reading like 700 DBQs last June, kind of looking at like what was necessary for contextualization. Okay. So first of all, you need something that is the context, like some sort of major development. And so here it would just be if you were writing about the Indian Ocean in a LEQ or the DBQ, you might just say during this time there were big empires that were established, or large scale empires is what the the framework says. And then you want to give an example of whatever development it is you have. What this does is it tells the reader that you're not just kind of making stuff up. So like last night's example, that DBQ with the railroads, then a lot of kids said industrialization. It's great. It's a big development. Obviously affects railroads and empire. And then it just would take one example of industrialization that's not railroads that would connect. So in the example we shared last night, it had telegraphs. That's okay. Steam engines is probably even a little better because it connects right to railroads, but some sort of example. So here it would just be one of those empires. So that's what I'm saying. You don't have to know every single one of those. I think one of the things that causes kids to stress out is world history is like a lot of stuff. And so it's important just to, know what you know and then be able to apply it. So this would be an example of a sentence then. You'd say the Roman Empire, and it established control over the Mediterranean basin. Okay. Now, how's that context? Well, if it established control over the whole Indian Ocean, of course, that's not true. But even if it was, then that's right on the topic. Context is often going to be something around the topic. And here it's literally around. And then you make a direct link to the prompt using specific language. Meaning, so here we have Roman control. So that's your specific thing. And then I'm assuming that the prompt includes exchange, imagine. You have to imagine a prompt that includes Indian Ocean exchange in it. And it's really important to use those words. Like in the example from last night where it was, and many of you might have done that. People done that, DBQ on the railroads and empire, like in your class? It's a pretty common DBQ for people to use. Okay, but so you have that, and in there you'd have to say something about railroads or empire. So you have to connect directly to the prompt. So really 2 or 3 sentences, you can establish context to do, you can establish context in an LEQ or a DBQ. So that's kind of what that would look like. And then you'd have to explain it a little bit. And this is one of the things with trade questions. It's like with the Silk Roads. The Romans didn't build the Silk Roads, right? Silk Roads is an expression. But Rome, building up a big economy in the Mediterranean, created surplus goods that then could be shipped along the Silk Roads. Same thing with China. Han China didn't build the Silk Roads. They're in between Rome and China. But Han China establishing a strong economy did make a surplus of goods that then could be shipped along the Silk Roads. So that's what that would look like. All right, I'm going to give you a moment to look at this source here and see if you can discover the famous Indian Ocean thing that this famous primary source is establishing. All right. So this is one of the primary sources, one of the primary sources by which we know that the people in period 1 used the monsoon winds. On the shores of the India, the wind sets in from the ocean, and then he gives it a different name, but monsoon is the name that we use it for. So this would be the kind of stimulus that might come along with a multiple choice question that would, in fact, there's one on albert.io that I wrote using this as stimulus. And what it does then is, what's this an example of? Oh, okay, where it is. There's the old Silk Roads. Okay. This map might be difficult, but if you screenshot it or if you get the slides later, you can blow it up and see. But this shows you all the things that were listed in that source. And the thing that's interesting here, you can see this line going straight across the ocean. That's how they'd use the monsoon winds. So instead of having to go like doink, 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 doink along the coast, go straight like that. Now, so we talked about contextualization, monsoons. The other thing that's really great about trade questions is that there's lots of possible pieces of evidence. So you might just think, and maybe even make a little list, what are there ones that you could name right now, trade goods that are happening at the time? And again, the great news is you don't have to know all of these. In fact, if you were to list 5 in an essay and then explain them, that's really just the same as listing 3. So when you hear about pieces of evidence in an essay, like a list of trade goods is going to count as one thing. So really 2 is about the same as 5. So that's good news. You don't have to know all of these, but some might come to mind. You might know that's the big one, right? Black pepper and cinnamon. And then really maybe the oldest trade good, like ever, there's cotton cloth from 4,000 years ago that originated in the Indus Valley that's been found, remnants in Mesopotamia. Okay. Romans, wine. Okay. And then from Africa. Now this just is about the Western end, again, because we have that good Roman source. There's lots more trade goods. I'm going to leave tons of stuff out, but these are all possibilities that you would have. So one of the reasons, again, why trade questions are great is that the evidence are things that you already know what they are. Like what all these things are. So you don't have, it's not like learning these weird names. And so that's trade questions. Good stuff. Okay. I'm going to take a peek over here and see sort of questions there might be. All right. Do we have questions in the ask a question here? Have people done the polling? Right. Oop, guess I'm not quite sure how to do this if I stop. Screen share the questions. Hey, glad you like the pottery, Jake. That is good stuff. All right. Questions and answers. All right, I'm just going to keep going, and I guess I'll stop screen sharing when I do the questions. Maybe that is the way to do it. Sorry. Oh, here we are. I would say that Mongol Empire, we got a lot of votes on that there. Good questions in here. So here's the thing with the Mongols. The Mongol Empire is going to have the same effect on Indian Ocean trade as what I just talked about with Rome and China, except it'll be in period 2. Meaning the Mongol Khanates, you might know that word for the Middle East, the Ilkhanate, and then the Khanate of the Great Khan, which is the Yuan dynasty in China, they established stability in those areas. So, yeah, is Doomer, is that your real name? Is noting here the Mongols make trade safer. So even though that's mostly not ocean trade, increasing land trade will actually increase ocean trade too, because there's more goods just moving around in general. So some of that stuff is going to the coast. Ocean trade has advantages over land trade. That are, because you can carry most stuff in boats than you can on camels, basically, right? So we have that. My biggest tip when you take the test, honestly, is like cheesy dad advice. And that might be because I'm a cheesy dad, but is just don't give up. And what I mean by that is once you start writing, you might be off for a little bit, then you realize you're off. Just keep going. Because the way the writing is graded, anything correct that you put down is going to count. And so if your first paragraph is not your best work, that doesn't really matter if the next 2 paragraphs contain contextualization and 2 pieces of evidence, and there's a good thesis at the end. Remember, your thesis can be at the end. So really, it's just don't give up. My best tip for studying is to make kind of lists of things that you already know and then sort them into, time period or spice theme or connections between things. So we have that. I think there's going to be specific essay ones that are happening here later. I'm going to put the link in this question thing. That's the link for the slides. Looks like that's going to a specific slide, but you'll figure it out. So those of you who really want the slide link, that's where it is. All right, we'll talk about tech here in a little bit. Looks like there's some great examples in there. Okay. The Yuan dynasty is the name of the Mongol dynasty in China. You don't have to know that, but that's what it is. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back here. So here we are in period 3. And this is really, so this is key concept 3.1. So it's the most important one in period 3. And Indian Ocean is in like the beginning section of it. It's like the first thing, along with the other ones. So Silk Roads, Trans-Saharan, Mediterranean, and the original ones in the Americas. So what you can see with this map here is, now this is where we're going to do continuity and change. So you might just take a peek there and see, what are the continuities? Like what's the same from before? And then we'll take a look at what's different. So again, this key concept literally has continuity and change in it. Okay. So, the seasons don't change. The monsoon winds are caused by the Himalayas. They're not going anywhere. So people continue to use those routes. They're continuing to trade some of the same things. The regions that were connected before are still connected. So you're looking, East Africa, Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia. And political stability isn't a continuity because it comes and goes. But what I mean, why I put that in there is the connection between political stability and increased trade, that continues. This is one of the great things about doing like trade for continuity and change essays or continuity and change questions. There's a lot of things that could be continuities or could be changes. So where do you use them? Wherever you need them in the essay. So it really depends on how you phrase it. I'll just kind of see that because when we look at the changes, you'll see, oh, those are kind of continuities too. It's another nice pottery shard. That was found in Africa, but it was made in China. So that's why that's there. So this is kind of a continuity, like it's the same kind of products going in the same areas. There's a lot more of them, the more products, and the range is wider. So it's further south into Africa. Like this pottery shard here was found in Great Zimbabwe. So southern Africa, inland. It's a long way from China where it started out. So there's more Chinese goods, more African goods getting into the system. So is that continuity? Well, yes, but it's the same reason. But it's also changed because it's a lot more. You can kind of use it whichever way you need it. There's also going to be some new products. Some people mentioned the boats and sailing technology in the questions in chat. Great. Those are great details. They're very useful. And those bigger, sturdier boats allow like bulkier things to be shipped. So like wood from India that's used to make other ships going to the Persian Gulf, Arabian horses going to India are two examples. A horse, bulkier than like cinnamon. I just mentioned this. You get a lot of Indonesian spices coming into the network also. And then there's new states. So again, this is a continuity that strong states are needed to promote trade. Strong states to regulate commerce and to provide security and create coins. There's like Chinese coins found in Indonesia. So even though they're not being used in China, the Chinese state's ability to make money, literally, is helping, is spurring trade in the Indian Ocean basin. So what are these new states? We have different dynasties in China. And as I hope you know, you don't have to memorize all of them. Although that song is kind of fun. If you haven't seen that, someone can throw a link in the chat, I'm sure. Chinese dynasty song. But if you do know them, you can use them. So it's one of those things. You don't have to, but it could be useful. Caliphates, though, is probably something that's worth knowing because it's a new form of government. So that's in the Middle East, the Islamic caliphates. And the establishment of Islam is one of the most important pieces of context for anything in Afro-Eurasia in this time period. And then one that's different because it's city-states and not an empire, and also very useful because it's in Africa, where a lot of textbooks are not as strong as they are in other areas, unfortunately. It's these Swahili city-states. I saw that in the chat too. So that's something that's maybe worth writing down if you're not sure what that is, because it allows you to bring Africa in, and it's a different kind of state. So you can see there's continuity and change. So the basic trade continues, but in kind of like variations on a theme. Okay. Now here's a couple things that people were mentioning, and it's a way to talk about cause and effect. So again, these are some details that students often remember. But here's how you can use them to do a more complex question. So causation, it's causation because having better, it's kind of a simple thing sometimes in history. Like, why was there more trade? Because the boats were bigger. Bigger boats, more goods. So these are some of the things that you might know with the Dow. That's the top one. Those sails. And that's a junk. The sails there are battened. And what that means is they're reinforced with wood or bamboo, and it makes them sturdier. The Chinese rudder, and then the navigational tools, especially the compass and the astrolabe. The other thing that's really useful about all of these things, well, maybe not the junk so much, but the other four, is they're all things that diffused. So the Latin sail and the astrolabe probably came from the Mediterranean and moved into the Indian Ocean and then moved back, improved to the Mediterranean. The word Latin is related to the word Latin. The ship's rudder is one of the many originally Chinese inventions, as was the compass. So you have those things coming in. So there are examples of cultural diffusion spreading in. And then you could also use it as cause effect. Better sailing equals more trade. Okay. Similarly, the more trade is going to be a cause of diasporic communities. Now, this is a term that the AP test loves, and this is a word, unlike those trade goods, it's probably not familiar to you. So if you're only writing down one or two things tonight and you don't know what this means, it's a really good one to know because it could be in a multiple choice answer. And if you know what it means, you'll probably get it right. So a diaspora is people who are spread out from an original homeland. I always think of it as being related to the word dispersed, even though I don't think it's the same root. That's just my mnemonic for remembering it. So if you look in the image here, you see these arrows showing the spread of Indian cultural forms. And what a diasporic community would be a small community of merchants who probably live as a minority group amongst people who are not from India in some place in Southeast Asia. So down in the Straits in Southeast Asia, there would have been communities of Indian people, and they would have lived with each other. Now, the monsoon winds make diasporic communities even more important because the winds blow in one direction for a few months of the year. And that means when people travel someplace, they need to stay there for a while before they come back. And while they're staying, they would live, they'd do life. They would go to the temple and they might marry, and they were, take in cultural entertainment like plays, and they would read literature to each other. So life would happen. And so the idea of a diasporic community is the idea of Hindu people or Buddhist people, for example, from India living in Southeast Asia. And then eventually that culture will spread along with people being there. Okay. And you might have seen examples of these in class. But in Southeast Asia today, there are Hindus and Buddhists all across this area. And then an effect of that will be new states will exist. So there's people who call themselves, leaders called Rajas, and with Shri in their name. Those are Indian honorifics, for king and lord, that are going to exist across Southeast Asia. So there'll be, you'll have Rajas in what's today Indonesia. Another reason to bring that up, just to go back to this, is that visually, these are some really cool things. So you may have seen Angkor Wat in your class. It's just one of the beautiful world history things, which was a Hindu and then a Buddhist, or the other way. It's been both, but it means temple, and it's a huge temple complex in what's today Cambodia. So that's South Asian religion spreading into Southeast Asia. Okay. Same here. You have to look at the people to see how huge that thing is. It's a giant temple on the island of Java. Buddha there. Okay. Cultural diffusion going the other way. Again, diasporic communities. And there's also Islam. So Islam will spread later in this time period. So first Hinduism and Buddhism, because at the very beginning of period 3, Islam didn't exist. And then it, takes a little bit of time to spread. But eventually Muslim merchants formed communities, throughout the Indian Ocean area. And so Swahili city-states are become Islamic, or at least the rulers are Islamic. And then today there's sultans. There were sultans. There's the Sultan of Brunei still exists, but across Indonesia there were sultans using that form. And then we have syncretism, another. So if we have diasporic communities, diffusion, and syncretism on one slide, it's AP world. So syncretism is when two things blend together. So Swahili is a Bantu language. It's an African language, but it has a lot of words from other Indian Ocean languages in it. So there's Arabic words and Hindi words and Persian words, Malay words, later Portuguese words, today a lot of English words. So the language itself is a synthesis. And then finally, we have biological diffusion. And so one example of this is bananas. It's a good example. And you should know these are starchier bananas. The bananas we eat today are like candy bars. This would be more like a plantain or even less sweet. It'd be kind of like eating a potato. And people pick them green and then they stew them. You can see the lower right-hand picture there is stew. They eat some meat, maybe vegetables, basic starch. All right, so this is cause and effect. So the banana diffusing is an effect of all this trade. The banana plant is from Southeast Asia. So because of the trade, eventually some people brought banana plants. And then the use of the banana created more nutrition. It's like the Columbian Exchange, the potato, and that caused population growth in Africa. And that population growth then is going to allow more production, and that's going to further increase trade. So you have like a reinforcing cycle. So we get to talk about bananas, which is fun. Today, Uganda, fun fact, third largest producer of the banana in the world. It's not a very big place, so a lot of bananas there. Last thing to say about this, it's a cause effect. So the effect is the bananas are grown in Africa. So one thing to keep straight is that there's a difference between trade, where things are moving back and forth, and diffusion, where things spread somewhere else. So bananas were not being traded across the Indian Ocean. They would spoil. The bananas were being grown in new places because of contact with people in other lands. All right. I'm going to click back over here and see if people, someone, thank you, Jillian, Chinese Dynasty song. Right. The thing with that song is most of the Chinese dynasties are one syllables, so sometimes I get a little like, really, they could be in another order, but if it helps you remember, that's great. All right. Do I need to put a different link in there, Dylan? Is that what you're saying? Should have just shared it with you. All right, let's take a look here at period 4. Period 4. This is going to be the time when, the big change will be Europeans coming into the Indian Ocean world. But with this, I want to just kind of caution you about a few things. So let's take a look here. So what's the continuities then? Again, it's going to be similar stuff moving around. People are still, buying pepper and cloth, especially cotton cloth. A lot of the trade goods that Europeans use in what people sometimes call the triangular trade in the Atlantic, it's actually a lot of Indian Ocean goods. It's more of a bow tie trade. Like the British merchants would go to India, buy cotton cloth, take that to Africa, trade that for people who'd been enslaved, and then traffic people across the Atlantic. So cloth, or they would take the cloth to New England and sell it there and get fish and bring the fish back. So they're bringing those Indian Ocean goods into the Atlantic world. Monsoons still make a difference. The story is when Da Gama goes around the coast of Africa, Diaz, his crew, they freak out. The first Portuguese guy to go around the southern tip. And they're like, we can't go anywhere. And then Da Gama gets there and he pulls into port. And, presumably some locals like, hey, calm down, man. When's it going to change in a few weeks? And then there's at least one source that should suggest Da Gama hired an Arabic pilot to take him to India. The monsoons, until steam, monsoons are still really important. Okay. Obviously, the big change is Europeans. But it's important to know that at least until the end of period 4, like even deep into the 1600s, the Europeans don't have territorial empires that control trading posts. And most of what they're doing, like I was just saying with the cloth, is they're carrying goods that were being produced by Asians. So they're really just getting into the shipping trade, like literally shipping the things around. Okay. That's a big deal, though. Those new companies, those East India companies. And then goods from the Americas, silver. The silver is a big deal. And that's sort of subject of something else, but that really spurs global stuff. I can't say this enough. In 1600, when the English show up in 1600 is when the English East India Company's chartered. And the first English East India Company ships, they get approval by the Queen Elizabeth, and they're going to go to India. And they get there, and they want to buy cloth, basically, in Bengal, like what's today Calcutta, Bangladesh. And they want to bring that cloth back. The Mughal Empire, they make a deal with the Mughal Empire. It's 25 times the size of England. And just like 200 years later, when the opium trade starts, there's really nothing that Bengali people want that the English have. So they're bringing like gold, money, just precious metals to get that. Now, by the end of the period, 1750, then the East India Company is controlling big chunks of India. So it changes, but it's important to know that doesn't happen until like the end of period 4. So it's a slow shift. All right, so there's 3 big European countries that you could know. And again, if you're writing an essay, using any one of them will be helpful. So really knowing one thing well is always better than knowing 3 things, kinda. So Portuguese, you can see that. So you can see they're still using the monsoon winds going from Melinda across to Calicut. And so they bounce up the coast and go across. The Portuguese are using the cannon to enforce their will, and they're kind of forcing other companies, other countries to trade with them, forcing rulers to allow them to carry their goods. So the cannon's a big deal. Now, the cannon's not unique to the Portuguese. Like, there are a lot of Indian rajas that had cannons. Like, Indian metallurgy was, advanced for a long time. And of course, gunpowder's from China. So it's not like these things are unique to Europeans. What was unique was the ability and the desire of European monarchs to tax their people and build up these big navies and go force other people to trade with them. It's really a political revolution a lot more than a technological one. Now you get into period 5, that starts to shift, the technology changes. But in period 4, the Portuguese don't have any technology that the India don't have. Okay. What they do though is set up these trading forts, this armed trade. So here's one in Kenya. What's today Kenya? Fort Jesus. It's actually literally shaped like a human figure, so it's like Jesus. In Portuguese, I mean Jesus. Fun fact, in Swahili, the word for prison is based on the Portuguese word for church. So draw your own conclusions, I guess. The Portuguese are different than the other 2 countries in a couple of ways. So the other 2 would be the English/British and the Dutch. The first is the Portuguese didn't really establish East India companies. They weren't private companies, that were crown operations. So like Fort Jesus here, that was built on order of Philip II of Spain, who's Philip I of Portugal. But King Philip ordered the construction of this fort. It's going to be a little different than we have these. So those are changes, right? That's a new form of business, these joint stock companies. And I know some of you are taking APUSH now, some of the interns in the chat, the joint stock companies is a big deal. Or in my school, kids take APUSH first, then they take AP World. They're going to set up new cities. So Jakarta today on the island of Java in Indonesia is one of the world's largest cities. It was originally called Batavia by the Dutch. And then now we will start to get imperialism. So you don't want to underemphasize that either. It's just important to keep it in mind. If you notice 1600 here, that's halfway through period 4 when these companies just even first exist. Eventually, though, they do become governments. All right. So then the continuity is that a lot of the products are the same. The Dutch are interested in Southeast Asian spices. The English are interested in Bengali, Indian cloth. So some of the same things are moving around. Famously, Columbus was looking for spices. Da Gama's looking for spices. And they know they're there. When Da Gama got to India, he met and had dinner with some Portuguese guys. There were Portuguese merchants who got there. They were just looking for a better route. All right. I'm going to stop and see if there's questions. Then I have a practice essay queue that we can look at. So I think if you've seen that, then I will. All right. Get some more questions here. I gave you my best tips. Yeah, good. All right. There you go. It depends. There's two different kinds of questions. Looks like someone's answering that there. All right. And two. Excellent. All right. So let's take a look here at this question. So here's a piece of stimulus that I found that could be used for a question. So then I wrote, I have like it's really a draft question that I wrote. So if you look through this is from this is a secondary source. So it's from somebody's, just a secondary person writing. It's like more of a pamphlet. And I saw it's like listed kind of like it's a book, but it's only 20 pages from this museum. It's from a museum in Mumbai. And a person I know who's researching the Indian Ocean had shared it with me. So it's just basic, kind of straightforward thing. Now, a couple things I just want you to notice here. First of all, it's got some sort of funny words in it, right? Because it has the Indian word here, or in one of the Indian languages, that's Hindi. So when you see something like that, but you know what it is from context, don't worry, just read through it. And then here's a word that I had to look up, coir. The coconut is not just delicious, kids. It is very useful. And so the husk from the coconut produces a fiber that can be used to make rope. In any case, so, you kind of use that to look down. Fibrous material. Okay. New reading, rarely encountered, China. Ambit, it's not necessarily a word that you would know, but it's kind of like orbit. But can you figure out what it means from context? China often brought into history of the Indian Ocean. Yeah, right, that makes some sense. Oh, got a row guy in there. Right. So here's some the kinds of questions that might go with that. And then the first couple, I put the what would be happening that would cause people to, what kind of thing would you be doing with it? And what I'm going to do, I have this on a Google Doc, and I'm going to put that in the link. So there's going to be a link that's going to come up. It's going to say SAQ on it. And if you click on that, it'll open up in the Google Doc where you can see all that stuff at once. If you see that there, it's green. Yeah, the coconut is also nutritious. All right, so if you do that, then you can click on here and you can see the question. Okay, I'm going to end screen sharing. Also, there we go. The picture back there, by the way, is student painting. That's one of my favorite things. It's Toussaint Louverture. There. So if you really want to do something nice for your teacher, like paint them a fabulous painting of one of history's dopest people. That's my recommendation. Or you could get him a camel set. All that happened once too. That was excellent. All right. So if you take a look over here on the document, I've done a couple of things. You can read it again, and I'll tell you why I highlighted it. Okay. Questions in here. So if you're doing a short answer question, I think the biggest tip that I can give you is that if the question asks you about the stimulus, because for two of them there's stimulus, so this is stimulus, this text. If that happens, you have to refer to it, otherwise you lose. And so the thing that I've told my students is, like, if you look down here, like at B, let's just take a look at B, because we haven't done any comparison yet. And it says, the last part here, describe similar to one described in the passage. So if you see that, or shown in the image, or described above, or in A it says illustrates, and it's got the author there, Chakravarti. I recommend that you just literally start your answer by saying in the passage or in the image, and then whatever part you're going to connect to. So here it says, I'm just going to type like an answer underneath here. You can kind of follow along if you want. In the passage, then I would just use the guy's name, Chakravarti, right? And then what is he saying that shows a human environmental interaction? Well, you have a couple possibilities that I highlighted. So the Monsoon one's something we're really familiar with. Chakravarti refers to the monsoon winds as an important part of Indian Ocean trade. I mean, so you've anchored that, and that's pretty obvious. And I think sometimes kids don't do that because it's obvious. It's like, well, of course it says that. Or if it's a picture, well, of course I see that there's a horse there, or of course I see that there's a ruler, or I see sails, right? But just literally say in the picture. So monsoon winds are important. And then it's a comparison question. So an exchange network other than the Indian Ocean. So then you can just start kind of, brainstorming, what are the other networks? You got your Silk Roads, you got your Mediterranean, you got your Trans-Saharan. So kind of, which one of those would you talk about? Well, I think here I would go, see, similarly, what's that tell the reader are doing? Well, it tells them I'm comparing the Trans-Saharan trade network was based on the human relationship to the environment. So what would that what would that be? Yeah, well, that environment's the desert. Then you'd say, well, what's the connection? Just like, oh, look, I'm comparing again, just like, right, traders in the Indian Ocean use the monsoon winds, merchants in the Sahara used camels. This is getting a little longer than it would need to be, but used camels with special saddles, right? So the camel saddle allowed Trans-Saharan trade in the same way that the monsoons encouraged oceanic trade. Boom. So there you are. So you've answered the question. A lot of you have probably been taught ACE. You've answered the question. The passage says the monsoon winds are important. That's the environment. And it's similar to the Trans-Saharan trade, right? And then you've used a piece of evidence. Camel saddle. Just a great piece of evidence, right? So that is a full answer. Okay. All right. Any other questions people might have? It's like, as I've said, if you leave one thing with here, is to take a look and just take the thing, go through your notes if you have notes from the class, and just see what you do know. Right? The night before, you should just rest, but just reviewing a little bit every day. All right. Oh, the camel saddle would be, so the humans need camels to go across the desert. So the environment is desert. And so the camel is how you get through the desert. And then the saddle is the adaptation that allows people to trade using the camel. So like Indian Ocean trade, the camel saddle is like super good leverage. Like you can use it to explain a lot of things. Right? Remember, you have a lot of days until the exam. You have a lot of time here to go ahead and take a look at some things. Oh, yay. Well, I hope that people got a little better idea how to do CCOT after doing the poll. The last tip I would give you with CCOT is that when you're doing a multiple choice question, you have to be careful because the wrong answers are usually the other. So if the question asks you for continuities, the wrong answers will probably be changes. And they all things that are true, right? So you have that. Yeah, for sure. Horses and stirrups on the Silk Roads, especially early. So then you'd have stirrups or even horse saddles. Those come on. The thing with the camel saddle is it gets invited a lot sooner, or gets invited sooner to our present time. It's a lot later. So very good. Well, it's been very fun doing this. I'm hoping I get to do another one. I'd like to talk. I don't get better at toggling between the things. So thanks so much for coming in, and maybe take a break, I don't know, watch a little TV, relax, or study. And then in an hour, there'll be another live stream coming to us from Pacific time, I think, that will be on CCO, or no, spice themes for another one of the periods coming up. I forgot which period, but it's in the slides. So hey, thanks a bunch. Good to see you. Oh yeah, some of my students are here. Great. Very nice to see you too. I'm going to end the broadcast. Good night.